Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. When you think of Vikings, what comes to mind? Probably longships, epic raids, and a pantheon of powerful gods like Odin, Thor, and Freya. For centuries, this Norse paganism was the heart of their culture. But then, something dramatic happened. Over a relatively short period, the entire Viking world converted to Christianity. But why? Was it a sudden spiritual awakening? Were they conquered and forced to convert? The real story is a lot more complex and, honestly, a lot more fascinating than you might think. It's a tale of politics, power, trade, and a clever blending of old and new beliefs. So grab your horned helmet, just kidding. They didn't actually wear those, and let's dive into the real reason the Vikings became Christian. First off, let's set the scene. The Viking Age, roughly from the late 8th to the late 11th century, was a time of massive expansion. Vikings were sailing, raiding, and trading all over Europe and beyond. They were interacting with cultures that were already deeply Christian. Think about England, France, the Byzantine Empire. These weren't just random encounters. They were deep, prolonged contacts. Many Vikings didn't just raid and leave. They settled. They established communities in places like England, in an area known as the Danelaw, and in Normandy, France. When you're living alongside Christians, trading with them, and even marrying them, cultural exchange is inevitable. Early on, it wasn't about a full-blown conversion. It was more like adding a new god to the mix. Some Vikings practiced what historians call syncretism. They might wear a Thor's hammer amulet right next to a Christian cross. Why not? To a practical Viking, it made sense to hedge your bets. The Christian god seemed pretty powerful, especially since his followers were building huge kingdoms and cathedrals. So maybe you'd make an offering to Odin for a successful raid, and then say a prayer to the Christian god for a good harvest. It was a pragmatic approach. We even see this in the archaeological record. Molds have been found that could cast both a Thor-as hammer and a Christian cross at the same time. This wasn't a conflict in their minds. It was about embracing whatever worked. But this gradual, bottom-up change was only one part of the story. The real tipping point came from the top down, and it was all about power and politics. As the Viking Age progressed, Scandinavian chieftains and kings started to look at the powerful, centralized Christian kingdoms of Europe with a bit of envy. Think about it. In pagan Norse society, power was often decentralized. A king had to constantly earn the loyalty of his jarls and warriors. But Christian kings had something different: divine right. The church taught that the king was chosen by God himself. This was a game changer. If you're a Viking king trying to consolidate your power and create a unified nation, this idea is incredibly appealing. Adopting Christianity wasn't just a religious choice. It was a brilliant political strategy. It legitimized your rule in a way that the old traditions couldn't. Take King Harald Bluetooth of Denmark, for example. In the late 10th century, he famously unified Denmark and Norway. On the Jellingstones, a massive monument he erected, he boasts of his achievements, including that he made the Danes Christian. Why did he do this? Sure, there might have been some genuine faith involved, but it was also a masterstroke of state building. By creating a national church, he could centralize power, collect taxes through the church structure, and create a unified Danish identity. He was also dealing with pressure from the powerful Holy Roman Empire to the south, which was keen on expanding its influence. By converting, Harald could deal with them on more equal terms, as a fellow Christian monarch, not just a pagan barbarian. It was a similar story in Norway with Olaf Tryggvason and later Olaf Haraldsson, who became Saint Olaf. These were Viking leaders who had spent time abroad, often as mercenaries in Christian lands. They saw how effective the Christian model of kingship was. When they came back to Norway to claim the throne, they brought Christianity with them. Now their methods were often not so gentle. The sagas tell stories of them converting chieftains at the point of a sword. It was often a choice: be baptized or die. This sounds brutal, and it was, but it highlights that this was a political project. They were breaking the power of the old pagan priesthoods and local chieftains who resisted their centralized rule. By forcing conversion, they were forcing loyalty to the new Christian kingdom. But you can't build a lasting faith on force alone. For Christianity to truly take hold, it had to resonate with the people. And this is where the early missionaries were incredibly clever. They didn't just come in and say, everything you believe is wrong. Instead, they found parallels between the old faith and the new one. Think about the figure of Christ. He was presented not just as a gentle shepherd, but as a powerful, victorious warrior king. Christ who triumphed over death and evil. This was a concept a Viking warrior could understand and respect. In poems like the Old English Dream of the Rood, Christ is depicted as a heroic warrior, eagerly mounting the cross as if it were a battlefield. He wasn't a passive victim. He was a champion. The saints were also a huge help. Norse paganism had a whole host of gods and goddesses, each with their own domain. Christianity offered a similar structure with saints. If you were a sailor, you used to pray to the sea god Njord. Now you could pray to Saint Nicholas. If you needed protection in battle, instead of Thor, you might call on Saint Michael, the archangel. This made the transition much smoother. Even sacred places were repurposed. Instead of tearing down a sacred pagan grove or demolishing a holy site, the church would often build a church right on top of it. This was a symbolic act, showing the new faith conquering the old. But it also allowed people to continue visiting a place they already considered sacred. The spiritual energy of the location was just redirected towards a new focus. Economic incentives were another massive driver. As Europe became more and more Christian, being a pagan trader was a disadvantage. Christian merchants might be reluctant to deal with you. Christian kings might impose higher taxes or trade embargoes. Converting opened up a whole new world of economic opportunity. It was like getting a VIP pass to the biggest market in the world, Christian Europe. A Scandinavian king who converted could make treaties, form royal marriage alliances, and be welcomed into the club of European monarchs. This brought stability, wealth, and prestige. For the average Viking, it meant safer trade routes and more opportunities to get rich. At the end of the day, the Vikings were always pragmatic. If becoming Christian meant better business, then that was a powerful argument. So, when we look at the big picture, the conversion of the Vikings wasn't a single event. It was a long, complex process that happened over generations. It started with casual contact and cultural blending on the frontiers. Then, it was accelerated by ambitious kings who saw Christianity as a tool for state building and consolidating their power. Their often brutal methods were then softened by clever missionaries who adapted the Christian message to fit the Viking warrior culture, presenting Christ as a heroic champion and saints as powerful new allies. And underpinning it all were the powerful economic and social advantages of joining the wider community of Christian Europe. It wasn't that the Vikings suddenly decided Odin was fake and Jesus was real. It was a gradual shift where the old ways slowly became less relevant to their changing world. The Norse gods were perfect for a world of decentralized raiding parties and chieftains. But for kings who wanted to build nations, for traders who wanted to access global markets, and for a people integrating into a wider European society, the Christian God offered a much better deal. The world was changing, and the Vikings, ever the pragmatists, changed with it. They didn't so much abandon their identity as they evolved it. The Viking spirit of adventure, courage, and exploration didn't disappear. It was just channeled in new directions. And that transformation is one of the most remarkable stories of the medieval world. So what do you think? Was it all politics, or was there genuine faith involved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about this incredible turning point in history. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this journey back in time, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next adventure. See you next time.